We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you almost jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, let me, since I haven't spoken on this, get a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Now, this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the mountain. Good evening in the Central. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Reparationist Perspective, bringing you those ADOC's hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote, socializing our suffering. And in this segment, we're going to talk about the Biden administration attempting to give away or having given away. What's up, Terry? Thank you for joining me again. They want to increase the money to the Afghan refugees, more of our reparations being spent on immigrants. Oh, yes, $30 billion is the number. Yes, family, as they flood this country with more ADOX-hating immigrants. Yeah, Afghan refugees. They're planning by the end of the year to have at least 100,000 in this country to gentrify our communities to give them advantages over ADOX as we are tethered to the bottom, as the bottom caste of this country. More immigration is being flooded in on top of us as the albatross around our necks. And like I said, I have no problem. Thank you, family. Thank you, Terry. I have no, please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Lord, what would I do without my moderators? Thank you, Terry. I got no problems with immigrants. I got a problem with immigrants being made American with our reparations before we're made American. I've got a problem with us being bottom caste in the country our ancestors built with their lives. I got a problem with ADOX being the anchor of the country's capitalism. I don't have a problem with immigrants. My beef is not immigrants. My beef is a government at every branch who have been complicit in weaponizing all of our advances to the benefit of immigrants in their own agenda, because capitalism needs a bottom caste. And they decided long ago that we, American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, are it. We're being squeezed on every front. This is my second show for this evening. I'm very behind because a lot of my work is advocacy. And so I'm not going to be advertising the shows until I know I can come on this air, because so many of my shows defaulted and my supporters were like, where are you? It says you have a notification that you're going live. We don't see you. We don't hear you. So I'm not going to be promoting until I'm here and can focus and know that I can come on this air. I think that, Sundays feel like a good time slot to catch up the week. So I'm trying to do this before my daughter comes home. I get this unimpeded time with you. Yet again, I thank you for rejoining me. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Thank you for supporting my voice in the new Black media. So let's get into it, because I got more than what's up here right now. But let's deal with this elephant one bite at a time. So let me share with you what they're doing with more of our reparations, family. Welcome to the live. So the White House is asking Congress for at least $30 billion to help fund the resettlement of tens of thousands of Afghans and to pay for the recovery from Hurricane Ida and other recent natural disasters. Now they put that in there, and I'm trying to find out what percent of our poor Louisianians received any support. The ones that could not escape Louisiana before Hurricane Ida hit. The ones that were stranded during Katrina. I'm trying to get a handle on that to bring you that story. But of course, I can't get a handle on how many poor ADOX in the deepest recesses of Louisiana received any relief. Still working on that. The short-term budgetary request to Congress, called a continuing resolution, includes $6.4 billion to help fund the processing and resettlement of Afghan refugees, at least $10 billion for recovery from Hurricane Ida, and $14 billion for other natural disasters, an administration official said on a call with reporters. Biden has been grappling with a dueling crisis through the month of August. The U.S. had to scramble to evacuate more than 124,000 Americans and Afghans from Afghanistan as the Taliban took control of the country sooner than anticipated. It has also seen fires ravage the western states as Ida has devastated communities in Louisiana, Mississippi, New York, and Jersey. The U.S. anticipates bringing 64,000 Afghans to the U.S. by the end of the month and 30,000 over the next 12 months, the official said. Of the funding for the refugees, $2.4 billion will go to pay for the Defense Department's operations overseas, where the Afghans are being held and processed. An additional $1.7 billion will go to the Department of Health and Human Services to provide funding and resources to the Afghans to help them what? Set up a new home in the U.S., including medical treatment, housing assistance, and English lessons. Me speaking. This is what I've got an issue with, family. Let's get into it. How many homeless are in the U.S.? Close to, well, it's 553,742 homeless in the U.S. on any given night, according to the recent National Point in Time estimate. Now, this was back in January 2017. I don't know why you can Google and you can't get more current information at the top of the search engine. This represented a rate of approximately 17 people experiencing homelessness per every 10,000 people in the general population. No, I want to know how many homeless in the U.S. in 2021. I don't want 2017. I want pandemic numbers. Welcome to the live. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Okay, so I don't want it by state. I want the U.S. Homelessness in U.S. rose for fourth straight year. The pandemic has made homelessness more visible. It's not invisible. Let me see what this says. Okay, so this is saying a new report almost certainly underestimates the spread, depth, and urgency of the crisis, given that the data doesn't yet reflect the pandemic, federal officials warn. Now, it rose in the fourth straight year with about 580,000 people living on the streets or in temporary shelter at the start of 2020. But the report, which was released on Thursday, almost certainly underestimates the spread, depth, and urgency of this crisis, and not by a little, federal officials warned. I can't give you numbers on how much homelessness has increased during the pandemic, but we know it has increased. Marcia Fudge, who was confirmed last week as President Biden's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, said during a briefing at the White House. She called the situation devastating and said the country had a moral responsibility to address both long-term homelessness and hardships spurred by the coronavirus. Me speaking. So we have a median national income as Black folks in the country our ancestors built with their lives of $30,000. The median national home price is $380,000. Keep that. Stick a pin in it. Now, this is underestimated too, in my humble opinion. Let me see. When was this? Hold on. I got to get dates because what percent of homeless in the U.S. in 2021 are Black? I'm making a point. I'm going to get there, and I'm not going to keep you long on this one because I got to jump off and queue up the next one. Listen to this. The state of homelessness in the U.S. 2021. No person should be homeless if you have public structures and public policies that allow people to have homes, food, and lead a dignified life in the U.S. Unfortunately, homelessness stats reveal that there is still a lot of work to be done. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about the social and geographic disparity, the leading causes of homelessness, the current trends, and the homeless assistance that is available in North America. However, before we can do any of this,
it's extremely helpful to know the exact scope of homelessness in the U.S. I'm not reading this whole thing. I just want to read you some highlights. The average life expectancy of a homeless person is 50 years. 39.8% of homeless persons are African Americans. 61% of homeless people are Black men and boys. 61% of homeless persons are men and boys. So 40% are us, the American descendants of chattel slavery. 61% men and boys. 20% of the homeless people nationwide are kids. 42% of street children identify as LGBT. New York has 1/5 of all U.S. sheltered homeless. The homeless problem is not on a downward trend. They are lying. Permanent housing interventions have grown. Yeah, these numbers, I'm not even going to bother reading them. Okay? Because they're not telling the truth. They're not current, really. I want to read you one more stat before I go to the next stat, as they give our reparations to the Afghan refugees in the tens of thousands, while telling us they can't do anything for us, while giving us a Juneteenth holiday that we've been celebrating forever, and August Hip Hop Month. The most striking disparity of homelessness can be found among African Americans, who only represent 13% of the general population, but account for 39% of people experiencing homelessness and more than 50% of homeless families with children. Are you listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth? So is there no wonder why 70% of our children are illiterate? 41% of all the youths detained throughout the country are ADOCs. Is this happening to immigrants who are $60,000 or greater liquid in this country of our ancestors built with their lives, to our 200 liquid? Or is this happening specifically to ADOS, ADOCs, B1 FBA B1, B1 FBA Freedmen? Who is this happening to? Are the immigrant children and the whites who share in the over $100 trillion egregious racial wealth cap that white folks killed and stole from ADOCs, are they homeless? Are they a part of this 40% and 50% of homeless families in the country? Are they amongst the 70% illiterate? Are they being set up for the preschool to prison pipelines? Or is that ADOCs? People keep trying to tell me that we'll be wealthless by 2053. I would venture to say we already are. And yet 87% of our electorate voted in Biden-Harris, who told you from the door they're not doing anything specific for our group. 87% of you, ADOCs and immigrants, Black immigrants, chose to go to these polls and put these two in office because the lamestream corporate with 3K's news media told you to fear Trump he's an overt racist over the very covert racist named Biden and Kabami. Because you don't understand the numbers, you're not reading, you're not researching, you don't know your history. You don't know the 100-year plan for our extinction to the numbers of Indians. You don't understand that immigration is being weaponized against us, and Trump may not have done anything directly for ADOX, but indirectly, when he wanted a border wall and to keep immigration out of here, at least ADOX could survive better than we are right now. Trump, your racist, mean-tweeting boogeyman of a president, staved off immigration, which is the albatross around whose neck? Is it the albatross around the necks of white folks who killed and stole all of our wealth? Or is it an albatross around the necks of American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery who've been neutralized economically? Which? You tell me. So let me get into a little bit more about these Afghans. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Thank you for your support of my voice in the new Black media. So are Afghans vetted before they come to the U.S.? Yes, everyone evacuated from Afghanistan is first brought to a military base in Europe or the Middle East, where U.S. officials are collecting information such as fingerprints and biographical details that they are then running through criminal and terrorism-related databases. Only people whose names are cleared through that process are then allowed to board flights to the U.S. Once they land, immigration officers at airports must decide whether to formally allow arrivals into the country, and they do not, and they do another round of background checks. While the vast majority of people are allowed into the country without issue, according to government officials, at least several hundred have been taken into secondary screening and held for hours and sometimes days before being released. A smaller number have been denied entry into the country and sent back to military bases abroad, or else had their permission to be in the country revoked and put into deportation proceedings. Once the Afghans arrive in the U.S., they're being routed primarily through Dulles International Airport near D.C., with some flights going to the International Airport in Philly. Then, depending on their legal status, they are going directly to live with family members in the U.S., or more typically to military bases around the country, which are providing temporary housing. Refugee resettlement organizations have been recruited to greet Afghans on the military bases when they arrive. Some Afghans are waiting to undergo medical screenings, while others are connected with legal and other services and move to their final homes. Isn't it nice to have a home? Our reparations being spent to teach them English and to give them housing. They're also required to receive a number of vaccinations, including the COVID-19 vaccine, according to a DHS spokesman. Some Afghans are arriving with valid visas, either through a family member in the U.S. who sponsored them or through the Special Immigrant Visa Program, intended for interpreters, drivers, and others who work with the U.S. military during its 2-decade war in Afghanistan. Some others are arriving in the final stages of the Special Immigrant Visa application process and are only awaiting a medical check before getting a visa, which grants legal permanent residency in the U.S. before making American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery whole with the reparations we are long overdue in the trillions over multi-generations. The majority of Afghans coming to the U.S. are either at the beginning stages of the visa process or aren't eligible for a special immigrant visa at all and are instead being let in on temporary grounds using an immigration tool known as humanitarian parole. Are there any complications in bringing Afghans to the U.S. on humanitarian grounds? Typically, when a refugee comes to the formal U.S. refugee admissions program, they receive some guaranteed assistance, everything from help finding and furnishing a home to several months of health care and food stamps. SIV recipients are entitled to the same resettlement benefits. Of the homeless families, 50% are ADOCs. We've got 39-40% that are homeless, and these numbers are off because they've not been able to tell us what the numbers are since the pandemic. We have little to no health care. If you got the free health care, it's inferior. For example, if you contracted COVID with free health care, you were intubated and killed, not given the $5,000 per shot remdesivir. If you had none or inferior insurance as ADOCs. And yet they're taking our tax dollars to give furnished housing, health care, and food stamps to the Afghan refugees. But anyone allowed into the country using parole isn't legally considered a refugee and therefore doesn't automatically have access to the same services. That poses two sets of issues. First, they aren't automatically eligible for any kind of resettlement assistance, meaning the agencies contracted with the government to resettle refugees must arrange help for many of the Afghans using primarily private donations. Resettlement agencies have asked Congress to make Afghans who were paroled into the country eligible for all the same services as other refugees, though Congress hasn't yet considered legislation to do so. Who's fighting for us? You've got more than 560,000 homeless since the pandemic, half of which are ADOCs. Who's caping for us? Where you at, CBC? Second, anyone allowed into the country using parole can live legally in the country for 2 years. So they must, in the meantime, apply for a permanent way to stay, such as a visa through another family member or by applying for asylum. Resettlement orgs have rushed to establish a network of pro bono lawyers and have begun connecting them to newly arriving Afghans on military bases. Recently, the White House asked Congress to pass a new law that would provide $6.4 billion to the resettlement effort, a sum that would make parolees eligible for certain temporary government benefits and make the parolees eligible for a green card after a year of living in the U.S. That proposal was meant to mirror the precise benefits the Afghans would have received if they had entered the country through the bureaucratic refugee admissions program, which the Biden administration chose to forego in the rush of the evacuation. But the idea has prompted questions from Republican lawmakers who have voiced skepticism about allowing all of the Afghans to become U.S. citizens eventually without authorities first learning more about their identities. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security flagged 44 Afghan evacuees as potential national security risks during the past 2 weeks as the government screened tens of thousands for resettlement in the U.S., according to DHS vetting records. Of the more than 60,000 evacuees who have arrived on the U.S. soil since August 17th, the list shows 13 Afghans remain in U.S. Customs and Border Protection custody, awaiting additional screening and review procedures, including interviews with FBI and counterterrorism teams. How did they get this far? Because you hastily put everybody on a plane and brought them here. Another 15 evacuees who were considered security concerns have been turned over to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, sent back to transit sites in Europe or the Middle East, or in some cases, approved for release after additional review. There are 16 Afghans on the DHS list who have not yet been cleared to travel and remain overseas at the transit sites U.S. officials call lily pads. I'm trying to find my article where Biden says he can't control who leaves the military bases. Here it is. Some Afghan evacuees are leaving military bases in the U.S. before resettlement. Something unexpected is happening at the U.S. military bases hosting Afghan evacuees. Many hundreds of them are simply leaving before receiving U.S. resettlement services, two sources familiar with the data told Reuters. The number of independent departures, which tops 700 and could be higher, has not been previously reported, but the phenomenon is raising alarms among immigration advocates concerned about the risk to Afghans who give up on what is now an open-ended, complex, and completely voluntary resettlement process. Hold on one second, family. My buggy daughter. In the speed and chaos of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in August following 20 years of war, many Afghan refugees, many evacuees were brought into the U.S. under a temporary status of humanitarian parole. Once transferred to U.S. military bases, resettlement groups, and U.S. officials have been trying to connect people with services for a smooth transition to the U.S. In a statement, a U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson declined to comment on the figures provided to Reuters by sources, but said people who had left the bases generally had ties to the U.S., like family members or friends, and resources to support themselves. Akin to the over 50% of ADOC's families and over 40% of the ADOC's homeless throughout the country. The spokesperson said that in addition, at the outset of the operation, many of those evacuated were U.S. citizens, permanent residents, or had approved special immigrant visas, so were able to depart quickly. But leaving early could cost other Afghan evacuees critical benefits, like expedited work permits, and to create a slew of legal problems down the road, given the complexities of the U.S. immigration system. It's a giant can of worms, said one U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services official who spoke on condition of anonymity. This could lead to years and years of terrible immigration status problems. The benefits the evacuees have received have been more limited so far than what's offered to refugees, but that appears set to change following legislation passed on Thursday by Congress, despite opposition from Republicans that would give Afghan evacuees the more extensive assistance usually provided to refugees. We should do everything in our power to help our Afghan allies get off to a strong start in their new homes, Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley said in a statement. The new legislation says Afghan asylum applications should be expedited, but those who leave U.S. bases early might not get all the legal orientation they need to start their applications. Immigration experts say Afghans who leave the bases are not breaking U.S. laws, and military officials have no legal authority to hold law-abiding Afghans against their will at any of the 8 locations hosting 53,000 Afghans who fled the Taliban on U.S. evacuation flights. We got over 300,000 homeless ADOCs in the country. But their concerns lean towards the evacuees from Afghanistan for a war that we should have never been in. That costs trillions of our tax-paying dollars. As we continue to vote blue no matter damn who since FDR. And our reparations be spent on everyone but ADOCs. I'm done with this segment. I'm going to come back in about 30 minutes or less once I set up how Congress has approved $15,000 per Asian Kamala's people, Kabami's people. They have pre-approved $15,000 cash to bring them over on H-1B visas to take over tech. More of our reparations being spent to flood the country with immigration. I'll be back with that story in about 20, 30 minutes tops. And with that said, family, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever ADOCs and its allies are, God truly is, because, family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. If I don't see you on the next one, you make it a beautiful God-inspired rest of your evening. Know that I love you black and I love you strong. Stay tuned for the outro.